The second question that we will start is, discuss the significance of the title of the novel No Longer at Ease. Discuss the significance of the title No Longer at Ease. This is the question that we are going to do, which is very important for the examination purpose as well. As I told you earlier, we will not go through all the questions, but some of them, which is important for us to know and to remember at the same time. So the title No Longer at Ease is an important question. Why? You can ask me again if you ask. Because I just now told you that I have done Nigerian reality. Now I am doing what? I'm doing which one I said I'm doing the title I'm doing. And I've done how does the a problem of the modern Nigerian urban and political problems also has been completed. So now I'm going for the title, then we'll go as a tragic hero, whether this novel is famous as a tragic hero or not later, that is all later. First, let us do from the point of view of the novel itself. আমাদের satire and modern Nigerian urban এই ব্যাপারটা আমাদের হয়ে গেছে, isn't it? এটা আমাদের হয়ে গেছে, আমার যতদূর মনে হয় এটা হয়ে গেছে। বলছি তোমাকে আমি তুমি বললে তবে আমি এগোবো আর কি। Satire on the modern Nigerian urban and political problems. হয়েছে কি এটা? ও ওকে ওকে ওকে, নো প্রবলেম। অ্যাকচুয়ালি এত ইম্পর্টেন্ট কোয়েশ্চেন্স রয়েছে যে always to remember what we are doing is also at times not possible. But contemporary Nigerian reality আমাদের হয়ে গেছে, isn't it? So now we will be doing which one? Which one just now I said told you? Political problems. Political problems. Now before we start with this very issue, Nigeria has already always been an issue of political problems. Always. And it is for this reason that it is so much of discussion in the world literature. Now we will be doing how does Achibe treats the Nigerian problem. To what extent does he treat it? And why does he treat it in that manner? So before starting with that, first, you have already said about Okunua. What a sad piece of the character is he who gradually gets involved in the practicality of life. If you ask me what is the practicality of life, taking bribe. Why, if you ask me, is the practicality of life? Because it is easy to take bribe, but to get away from it is very, very difficult thing. So just now I told you that you'll be doing no longer tea as a contemporary Nigerian reality from inside, which we see that the Nigerian people do not allow him, we have done, we do not allow his corruption. Why? Because they think that he has done certain thing which is never expected by them to do it. So naturally, the Nigerian reality becomes very important aspect of this novel. And we will be doing this now so that it becomes clear to us how the Nigerian reality is brought forward over here. So no longer at ease is the story of Okunwa, who is a civil servant, but his countrymen is not ready to accept his involvement in bribery. He is not accepted by his Nigerian people because he has taken to corruption, which was very much unexpected for him to do. And but he had done it. However, he got involved in it. Whatever minor it is, involvement is an involvement. Naturally, his people is not ready to accept him anymore. So this contemporary Nigerian reality is a very important concept in this novel, which we will be doing it now. So what do we find over here? It is all about this man who had been sent by his people to abroad, sent abroad to improve upon his studies and do something for the people of Nigeria. So crisis in the soul in Chinua Achebe is no longer at ease. Is very, very important for us to understand. Just as Western civilization was going through the gyres of anarchy due to lack of religious faith in Yeats' vision, so too in Achebe's novel. The onslaught of the white man, among other things, caused displacement of the native societies, degeneration of native values, and unending chaos in Africa. They never expected him to be involved in what? Corruption. It is one of these phases of chaos, namely the pathetic situation faced by those born at the crossroads of culture and therefore unable to owe allegiance neither to their very native tenets nor to the values inherited by them by being exposed to the Western materialism, is the core issue of no longer at ease. The people of Nigeria had not sent him abroad to study, get involved in corruption. His novel became famous and won the Nigerian National Trophy for Literature. So it is Achibe's successful attempt at anatomizing the evils that beleaguered the Nigerian society just before independence. With the advent of the white man, there is a loss of native values such as communal harmony, placing society above self. Wherever The white man has entered into forming colonialism. There only slowly and steadily corruption had entered. This happened also in our country. So, communal harmony placing society above self, respect for the aged and reverence for achievers, which resulted in the absence of self-analysis and a stable code of conduct of ethics in the society of the pre-independent Nigerian, lured by Western education and well-paid jobs. It is true that always these bureaucrats who join service are well paid, and the people of the country do not like them to be get involved in bribery. Lured by Western education and well-paid jobs, the youth of the country do not hesitate to stoop to the levels of immorality and dangerous permissiveness. Obi Okonwa, the central character in No Longer at Ease, is a typical educated Nigerian young man who, to begin with, wanted to cleanse Nigeria of its evils. He was a brilliant student whose kith and kin pool in their hard earned money to send him to England for further studies in accordance with the usual practice. In return, they expect him to bring honor and prosperity to their village. But much to his consternation, Obi notices right from the time he lands in Nigeria that his country is no longer the Nigeria of his dream, but it has already advanced in corrupt practices such as bribe taking. Though his intentions are ideally good, Obi fails to carry them out in his life because of the negative changes in values. While courage and inflexibility rule the society of Okinawa, his grandfather Obi is a typical product of a modern era that mixes motives and values, a miserable amalgam, the offshoot of a weak hybrid culture. Sobi has already degenerated himself because of his taking bribe. The strength of the novel does not lie in characterization but in its brilliant description and analysis of situation and conflicts that we see have already taken Obi from all sides. Obi often ponders over the ill-advised traditions of his country, such as paying bride price, the Osu practice, and also the undermining the native of values by the ushered in material values like the English language. Bride price, we call it dowry, but in Africa it is bride price. You have to pay the bride the price, marrying her. And the Western way of life, wherein the important question in the cocktail circles is how is the car behaving, as Achebe observes in his novel. The man who conquered us and colonized us also brought his language and his administration and his style of life and everything. These are some of the problems and some of the facts of our existence. Obi is a sensible young man who could question the unjust authority of Mr. Green, his English boss. He was timid enough to thwart the practice of accepting bribes in his personal life, and was modest enough not to fall for the vanities usually associated with a foreign return. Yet Obi fails ultimately because, on the one hand, unlike his heroic father Okunwa, he was not decisive enough in his actions, and on the other, he lived at a time when an individual is rendered important to be firm about anything in life, either in personal affair such as marriage or in public life where he cannot impose freedom of his will. Here lies the crisis of his life. He has taken bribe because he thought that his position allows him to do so. On the domestic front, Obi testifies to the Aibo adage. What is the Aibo adage? Mother is supreme. He holds his mother in high regard and is constantly aware of her sacrificing nature. Yet a vehement approval of his intended marriage to Clara, an Osu girl, has him in shocked dismay. It is when Obi is forced to choose between his mother and Clara that he falls prey to emotional turmoil and loses his moral balance and his ideals start disintegrating. After returning from his village to Lagos with his equanimity in shreds, Obi succumbs to later events. He succumbs to bribery. He gets caught red handed while accepting a bribe and is forced to face trial in a court of justice. Yet Obi is arguably strong. To cite a few instances, his last minute decision to prevent Clara from a proposed abortion and his belated idea to marry her. His reluctance to recommend those candidates who fall short of the minimum qualification to merit a scholarship, and finally the betrayal of the treacherous tears on being called a young man of education and promise in the court by the judge. In our country also we see those who pass TET, CTET or any of the like examination, even they are taken into service. Or who fail also are taken into service. So Obi Okonua, the 20th century matters when he journeys home with certain definite ideas regarding his future. What he fails to foresee, however, is to find himself in that slope of instability wherein a brilliant man like him would stand confounded. He is unable to acknowledge faith in his old dispensation, the norms which are in the throes of panic, caused by the advent of alien people crushing their gods. He is equally restive in the milieu of urban Lagos because he is unable to conform to the ideas of the West. In a society which is predominantly materialistic, he is forced to follow such modes of living as maintaining a chauffeur driven car, upkeep of a modern home, luxury of frequenting nightclubs, paying taxes besides expenses involving the education of his brothers and sisters, and contributing to the family finances. The life and career of Obi Okonowa proved that the advent of the white civilization loosed blood-dimmed tide of anarchy on African life, as it happened everywhere where colonialization had taken place. I would be glad of another death, disillusioned with the native life which is still in the vice like grip of the outdated ideas and the futility of the Western education. Actually, we think that the Western education improves us, but Western education also teaches us to be not true to our own selves. In a picture enclosing the gulf of difference between caste, outcast, this predicament of Obi and his likes is poignantly voiced in Okara's poem, where he has written, when at break of day at riverside, I hear a jungle drum, then I hear a wailing piano. Solo speaking of complex ways of life of these people in the remote Nigeria. The common struggle of educated Africans who stand confounded between acceptance and rejection actually makes us sad. They want to do something good for the country, but it's not possible for them to do it. Is evocatively portrayed in the tone of character of Obi Okonoa. He feels terrible after accepting his first bribe, but he was not able to fight the practice. He could not find for himself a balanced value, scale of values, with the help of which he could have retained his integrity. In the modern Nigerian society, unlike in the tribal communities, the sharing of any benefit took place only among the top people. As a result, everyone tries to get to the top through the disreputable means of offering bribes. We talk of Obi of Nigeria. Isn't the same thing happens in our country? It had nothing to do with you or me. It was an alien institution, and people business was to get much from it as they could without getting into trouble. An interesting twist in the matter is that it may cause more trouble by refusing a bribe than by accepting it. There is a method to this madness too. As the Minister of State says, the trouble was not in receiving of the bribe but failing to do the things for which the bribe was given. Thus, one evil paves way to another. When you are in power, that time you really forget about the responsibilities that has been imposed to you by the people. The people believed you and then brought you into power, but you have misused the power and made the people fool by the powers that you have acquired from them. Thus, one evil pays way to another. Even a good custom could outlive its purpose and value and thus become corrupt, a symbol of anarchy in a different situation. The offering of the kola nut that signified politeness and warmth towards the visitor in the traditional society, for instance, is equal to the offering of bribe outside the traditional context, or obi being referred to as the only palm fruit of the village. The village code of conduct has been violated, but a very embracing and a bigger one has not been found. While old values like courage and valor are no longer valid, the educated natives' condition, like that of Obi, is charged with tragic undertones, and as worse than that of his brothers in the bush. Achieve comments. His abortive effort at education and culture, though leaving him totally redeemed and unregenerated, had nothing less than something to him. Now, this colonist criticism is true. Once you have the power, once you have the education of the abroad, you think that you are very powerful indeed. Where then is the solution for the likes of Obi, whom we see by the dozens in modern societies? It is perhaps in evolving a culture of their own from their heritage handed down by generations, leavened by cosmopolitan experience as a result of close encounters with the colonizers. As the Dawn among the Indian philosophers, Dr. S. Radhakrishnan says, life is like a game of bridge. The players are dead cards unknown to them, but they can play the game well or badly. A skillful player may have a bad deal and yet win the game, whereas a bad player may get a good and yet make a mess of it. So people of like Obi Okunowa can escape suffering crisis in the soul by making right choices like good bridge players. Their timely decisions and exercising controls and freedom to expand according to the changing times and needs of an ever growing society can help them get out of the iron hold of dogmas and retain their equanimity. The African is corrupt, though, through and through. So are the Indians. They are all corrupt, says Mr. Green. Ichimiachi is no longer at ease. So when corruption becomes an intrinsic part of life, then society's moral fabric is shred. Not so much for its frailty or weakness, but because nudity becomes fashionable. Because resources are scarce, the little that is available is amassed by a few in a rat race that smacks of deceit, defecation, callosity, and individualism as demagogues take up slots in the speeding gravy train that spews impoverishing fumes in its wake. Corruption breeds animosity, anger, fear, frustration, and despondency, which is a fertile ground for strife. The healer's phenomena is now a new thing, for it is as old as humanity itself. What is only of concern now is the level to which it has grown, especially in Africa. So asking for a crime in Africa is no more a crime. But dear gentle reader, have African always been corrupt? This is a great question. The new dispensation falling hard upon protracted liberation struggle across the African continent as well as peaceful negotiations for independence from colonial power. One would have hoped that independence would really bring good sense into the people. There could have been hope if hope is what one usually sees at the dawn of each new day. But a close analysis of Chini Achebe is no longer at its spells down for the continent, especially when one considers the setting of the novel. So the protagonist Obi Okonwa, who is 26 years old, is an interesting character whose tragedy is that he's an African born to African parents who believe that as Christians they must shun whatever is prescribed by the traditional customs of their people, yet remaining selectively within the same belief, hypocritically preferring to support those customs that justify what they want. As a remnant of a dysfunctional and disengaged African family that seeks solutions from spirituality, Obi struggles to locate himself in the national biography. When he is asked to tell a folk tale in class, he stutters, stammers, and weeps as none comes out of his mouth, much to the delight of his classmates who burst into delirious laughter. His failure to tell a folk story signifies the dust of African values because his father forbids his mother, who is a good storyteller, to impart anything to their children through folklore because these are Christians. So you see, Christian folklores are not allowed in this continent, Africa. There is hope, however, when Obi's mother, Hannah Okonwa, defies her husband and tells him a folk story, which he relates in class much to the delight of his mates. Obi is intelligent and always tops his class, which makes him with the hearts of many, and subsequently gets a scholarship courtesy of the Progressive Union of Umofia, which raises £800 for him to study law in England, not a small amount, a big amount. There is much hope for Nigeria, for Umofia, his hometown, and for Africa in general, as Western education is considered a passport into European terrain through European posts. However, Obi decides to study English instead of law, as his people back home hoped. A close analysis of Obi's character and the way he betrays his family, community, and nation reveals that his tragedy stems from both nature and uttered how he was brought up by his parents. Nature places a burden on him as an African who, despite his struggle to locate himself in the discussion that shapes his people who believe that an only palm tree does not get lost in fire. Naturally, he is still expected to be the big tree on whose back smaller trees sit to reach the sun. His father, Isaac Okonowa's conversion to Christianity against his father's will, captured in Things Fall Apart, always havoc on Obi's well being. Always he compared these three novels, which are his trilogy. As nature would have its parents bore four daughters in a row, which makes them anxious and crestfallen. Thus, when Obi was born, they named him Obi Ajuru. Obi Ajuru, the mind of at last is at rest. That is the meaning. In most patriarchal societies, a boy child is said to be the inheritor of his father's estate as well as the future head of the family, which places a burden on Obi as the only boy child in his family. Through flashback, constant time shifts, and fracturing of the plot, Chinua Achebe adept explores the natural tracks that shape Obi's character, which he has no control over. He has fallen from his position because he was unable to control himself. Unlike his grandfather Okonkwo in Things Fall Apart, another novel of the trilogy, who is violently inclined to take action again without putting him much thought into the aftermath. Obi, like Hamlet in William Shakespeare's Hamlet, delays action by dwelling much on thoughts such that by the time he decides to take action, he would have been overtaken by events. It is largely his idealism which spells doom for him. Obi's decision to study English instead of law so as to be able to defend his oppressed people who starved themselves to raise money for his studies abroad is as deceitful as it is individualistic. By studying English, he sides with the imperialists against his people, whose way of life is enshrined in the folk tales of their existence as well as their rich proverbs. An only boy child, Obi is nurtured in such a way that he believes in the individualistic nature of man. His over reliance on spirituality as well as his religious intolerance. As a senior civil servant, Obi comes face to face with the ugly nature of corruption, which is prevalent all over the world. The so called experienced men at the top, they get involved in corruption. The protagonist hates corruption in a country where it is in vogue, which earns him insults from many corners. Most of his countrymen believe that for one to get a favor, one naturally has to offer a bribe. But this is not true. The same thing we believe in our country. To get something, you have to bribe. So, as the secretary to the scholarship board, Obi remains steadfast in his resolution that you never accept anything, money, sex, or other favors from anyone, kin and kith included, to give favors of preference, and for that he becomes a beacon of hope for a new dispensation. They hope a lot from Obi that Obi would improve their society. However, the materialistic nature of urban life, which is a colonial creation, impedes hope as the rat race mark is set on again. As a senior civil servant in Lagos with a European post, the protagonist swims in affluence as he gets a brand new pleasure car, moves into an opulent neighborhood where he is the only person of color in a block of flats. He is the only black. His failure to disentangle himself from the spiraling depths that threaten to choke him. It is true that what happens to such men who take bribes fall into debt. Because taking bribe forgets their position, their opulence. The death of his mother, Clara's disappearance from his life, his wife, Clara, and the warped nature of his individuality lead to his succumbing to the corruption. As he begrudgingly accepts his first bribe, pound 50 to be precise, from a wealthy Nigerian businessman who wants his son to get a scholarship to study in England, notwithstanding the fact that he could afford it since the scholarship is so poor for poor people. Corruption is, after all, cancerous. It spreads until the entire body is affected, but the initial entry point is not cut out. So deep into the corrupt gravy grow soup is Obi's body that he can no longer extricate himself. Could only go deeper until he drowns. When he finally when he's finally arrested in a snare with a decoy of only pound 20 pound, Mr. Justice William Galloway, the High Court judge of the Lagos of the Southern Cameroon, wonders, I cannot comprehend how a young man of your education, brilliant promise, could have done this. But Mr. Green's OB's boss, who has always been skeptical of educated Africans, says, I am all for equality and all that. But equality won't alter facts because the African is corrupt through and through. Could you really be that far from the truth when corruption becomes a way of life and a bane on progress to the motherland? We really are no longer at ease with our corrupt selves and the speeding gravy train passing the graveyard of our hopes blows its deadly whistle. Bribery is an important element in Chinua Achebe's book, No Longer at Ease. It shows us the way how bribery corrupts even diplomats and those who are in high power in the society after their success in civil services. Men of civil services often get entangled in bribes. Obi's case has been exposed, or otherwise, if you have been a little bit careful in taking bribes, nothing would have happened to him. But his bribery became a common factor. Everyone in Nigeria came to know that he could be easily bribed in order to get his service, the, which he enjoys in his power. So Obi is full of righteous indignation at the man implied accusation. It's true he has taken bribe. Bribery is quite commonplace, but Obi withstands the first test of his resolve against bribery. When a man offers him money to recommend his sister for a scholarship, Obi refuses the man's offer, and after his encounter with Mr. Mark, he did feel like a tiger. He had won his first battle hands down. However, there is a small temptation in Mr. Mark's offer, even if it is not overwhelming. The reader becomes aware that refusing bribes may be as easy as Obi hopes. For some, feel that you may cause more trouble by refusing a bribe than by accepting it. We all know if you refuse bribe means you are totally segregated from the society of the bribe takers. However, Obi could not control himself. However, Achieve shows the reader that Obi's financial situation is becoming increasingly desperate. It happens, when you start taking bribe, you just go on increasing your amount. Even lesser amount is a great amount to you. But what makes you more enjoyable is the power that you enjoy of taking bribes and no one is there to challenge you. Such is what has happened to Obi. See, Achieve's account of Obi's downfall holds meaning of Baltimoreans and people of all cities. So most people agree that violent crime, deplorable public schools, and homelessness are serious threats to Baltimore. We regard such unsavory aspects of our society with righteous indignation. Much as Obi detests the corruption that pervades Nigeria's government when he returns from England, just as Obi begins on the right path condemning corruption, by that time he's already into it. He's been caught in the web of corruption. We may even try to effect change by re-electing better government officials or better volunteering with organization. But you see, once corruption has entered into the web, the spider web, it is very difficult to get it out of it. So it was with Obi. Obi was unable to come out of the corruption that he got already involved in it. It is what you can say, it is his destiny, his fate that is responsible for such a situation. Otherwise, this wouldn't have happened to him, but it has happened to him.